Hello, everyone. Just setting up my phone so I can see your chat because I'll be using a whole bunch of screens on my computer. Uh, because this is going to be one of those hangouts where, although I've invited other people by dropping the link in my Discord server and on Twitter in the Cauliflower Lovers group, I though I've invited other people, I imagine this will probably be just me talking and using my screens. And if somebody wants to chat, I really want to see it. So I've got my chat pulled up on my phone. It'll be right in front of me. And I'll put it on a little stand so that, it'll be right there in front of me. But today I'm going to go over the 2018 Colorado Democratic Party platform. And what I think I'm doing here is what I would expect from politicians. I learned this week that I am a full state delegate. My plan to sign up on the delegate at large list actually worked. And although I gave the spot that I could have run for to another guy from my precinct named Quan, because I felt like it would be really good for his resume, because he's actually an aide to a state representative right now. He has aspirations for politics, and I support him a lot. I still wanted to go as a delegate, so I signed up on the delegates at large list, and I got chosen. And I got the emails confirming that I am in fact a state delegate. And also delegates at large list. Let me just and I got the silence this. Confirming that I am. Also, as far as me getting chosen to be a delegate, one of the things that stood out to me was I got a couple text messages from candidates for a lot of different positions within the government. And these candidates somehow knew that I was a delegate to the assembly before I got the actual official notification myself. And I made a little bit about that on my Twitter, like, fine, send me messages, but I don't even know if I'm a delegate, how do you know when I don't know? And then I finally got the email this week, and yes, I am in fact a delegate. And what gave me pause with that was I wonder if there were like a list of added delegates that was given out to certain politicians and not others. There's a little bit of question in my mind as far as how does everyone get notified who is going to be a delegate and who is not when they signed up on the delegates at large list. Of course, everyone who got voted in at the precinct caucuses, they were known to all the different candidates, but the ones that were added on afterwards, how do we know that it was a fair playing field? I'm not going to really bark up that tree other than just saying it right now, because I just don't have the time to follow what I would consider small time political trickery. It's like, it matters, yes, but you gotta have priorities when you're looking for a big fish versus like all the little fish of corruption. I found a whole bunch of big fish in the previous assemblies that I've gone to, and I posted them on YouTube for everyone to see. Let me just adjust my butt pillow for a second. Oh, by the way, the all-women Ghostbusters pink Ghostbuster logo, because I am at least trying, even though I'm the world's worst social justice warrior. Let's see. So previously, I exposed a lot of things like fake slates at assemblies, and I showed that the ballot boxes were not visible for a good amount of time. You know, they would go behind certain curtains where they could have been tampered with, things like that, things of that nature. And this year, what I want to talk about before I just get into the platform is when I was a delegate for the Republican Party, there was a platform that was put out for us to vote on at the state assembly. The method that we voted for this platform was we had a giant Scantron sheet of every platform plank, every position that was to be taken. And one of the platform planks that was put forward was to be in opposition to the legalization of recreational cannabis use. And to the surprise of the establishment, the delegates that showed up voted that down to the tune of like 80% against being against cannabis in our state. And these were Republicans, you know, mostly of a libertarian persuasion, I feel. But these were Republicans. And somebody just asked me to go on to YouTube to get their link PM to them. Let's see. Community messages. Okay. Next. There we go. And that was Thomas Remain. Okay, so back to what I want to say here. So in the Republican Party, we had Scantron sheets. We could vote on each and every line item, right? Well, now that I'm in the Democratic Party, the party that's supposed to be a little bit more transparent, you know, a little bit less the evil empire from Star Wars, you know, a little bit less run by Darth Vader. Now, I find that what they want to do is have a simple yes or no vote for all of the platform planks that they have put together. And if you want to try to amend the entire platform and say there's one little thing that everyone disagrees with, you have to go around with this form the morning of, before 10 a.m. They've made that clear. And you have to find at least like 10 or 11 people from this platform committee, and you have to have signatures from them. And they at least give you a list of the people who are on that committee, right? But it's such a hassle to do this. You have to go get 10 signatures for people who actually approved this platform before to have them say, yes, I believe we should vote on this for you. And you fill in like the line item that you want changed, and then you can bring it up to the assembly and have everybody feeling like, man, you're dragging this thing out. You're making us stay longer. We want to get back to our kids. We want to get home in time for dinner. What the fuck are you doing? You know, that's what they do instead of having everyone vote line item style on Scantron sheets. I don't know if the Scantron sheets would be like too expensive because they're not as good of fundraisers as the Republicans, you know, but we're going to be in the First Bank Center. You know, this is where I would go to watch UFC pay-per-views like what live and go be in the audience. The First Bank Center's fucking huge. Right? I've seen concerts there. And so they've rented that thing out, but they don't have the money to pay for the Scantron sheets, you know? But I don't think it's even about that. I think they want just a simple yes or no vote, and they want to do it by acclamation, which is just everyone saying yay or nay, right? So then there's no chance that we can really have a disagreement about one little thing and try to get that one little thing dropped. It's the worst example that I've seen of pork barrel mentality, where like things are injected into bills in order to get them passed. You know, a very popular bill will have a couple riders on it that are a little unpopular, but the only way to get them passed is to attach them to something that is popular, you know? So that in mind, as in this hangout, I'm going to do my due diligence as, you know, a delegate and actually read the whole platform that I'm going to vote yes or no on. When I'm looking at these line item things, I'm going to comment as to whether or not I feel like they're appropriate, right? And of course, I don't feel like we're going to be able to change little things about the platform, but I do think that it's going to be eye-opening to say the least, because the culture here on YouTube and in regular America is a little bit different than the culture of people who are the establishment of the Democratic Party. I've already glimpsed a little bit of this platform that I'm going to share with you all. Thomas.
Hello.
You're going to read with me.
Great.
Yay. We're going to get through this.
Nice.
So first I got to do a screen share in order to show some of these things that I'm talking about. So that's why I had to set up my phone to be able to see the chat. This is the call to the state assembly that I got. And
okay.
I gotta lock the screen on me now. Okay. First, well, this is just the agenda, right?
So you consider yourself a Democrat?
I consider political parties just to be vehicles for people to get elected.
So were you a supporter of Hillary Clinton?
Yes, I was. Over Bernie Sanders, yes, I was, and that's something that you could see on my channel. That when it was Bernie versus Hillary, prior to the nomination of Hillary, I was on the Hillary side of things.
Right. So are you happy with how Trump's doing, or what do you feel about Trump?
It's a nightmare to me. And I feel like what I'm feeling as far as the shock and horror, it's really his fucking Twitter account.
Right.
His Twitter account is in the heads rent free of every liberal leaning person. It is the most powerful thing in the world as far as depressing people daily. It is.
Do you think Oprah's going to run against him in 2020?
I don't know, but now that he's president, anything's possible.
Because a lot of people are saying she's going to run.
I don't know. I know that I decided to get involved in politics again because it's not just about the presidential election and what happens in this cycle, the off years, actually affects the presidential election. You have to get involved in the elections 2 years prior in order to be in a position to be the delegate that you want to be to try to make a change.
It's a huge process now.
Yeah.
Massive.
So here is the agenda, right? And all of these people, every one of them now, I actually have their phone numbers. Like I have the phone numbers of their campaign managers and them, and a couple of representatives and delegates that have been campaigning for them. But seriously, each and every one of these people have called my phone, and I've seen their name on the caller ID.
Right.
All of them. So if one of these people were to get the position that they're running for, I have their phone number. I just call them up. Or they're using a burner phone, maybe. But I don't know. Maybe they'll just have to change their phone number. Because if they piss us off, us delegates, we can just call them up. It's weird how that works. I mean, I'm just sitting in my car, about to get out of my car as I just finished driving home, and Joe Salazar calls me on the phone. I'm like, what? I've seen you at speeches at rallies.
Right.
I've been filming you, and you're just calling me up out of the blue. What's this for? Oh, you've got to run for Attorney General again.
Yeah.
So you can see in this agenda, there's not really a spot for for people who want to change the platform, right? What has to happen is you have to use Robert's Rules of Order, and you have to actually insert this change into the agenda that they have.
Right.
And they will try to run through this thing as quickly as fucking possible, right?
Yeah.
They want to get to this point, adjournment, without any hitches whatsoever. They don't want anyone bringing up anything, right? Now, after each one of these people gets to get up on stage and have one person nominate them, one person second them, and have as many cheerleaders as they want on stage with them. After each one of these people talks for 3 to 10 minutes, depending on how long they let it go, then we get to vote, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, we only get a yes or no vote for the platform, and we get to vote for these 5 things, right?
Yeah.
But what should be more important is the platform, right?
Right.
So what's going to happen is there's this report from the State Party Platform Committee right here, right? They're just going to try to say, I motion that we vote by acclamation, right? And that means just everyone in the crowd saying yay. And if they think that they hear 2/3 of the people saying yay, then when they go for the nays, they don't hear more than 1/3 of them saying nay. Then they just say, oh, well, it's obvious. This is the platform we all want, so we're just going to go forward with it. And it'll be that fucking quick.
Yeah.
Right? It shouldn't be This should be actually something where people have a chance to, hammer out some business. But they're trying to get to that adjournment thing in the agenda as quickly as possible. Let everyone get home to their families, right?
Yeah.
So here's the actual platform, right? As it was emailed to me. As nobody has talked about it here on YouTube at all, here's my state's platform. Stable Genius Progressive says Styx Hexenhammer 666 is running for governor of Vermont. Good luck to him. I know that one of his biggest supporters is Nick Bravo, and yeah, he's got a real fan there. I'm gonna blow this up a little bit so that each line can be read on the screen. All right, here we go down it. This is the overview. It should be fairly self-explanatory.
Yep.
Now, here's the table of contents. Immediately, the third line jumps out at me. Right? I'm like, oh no. You can have social justice leanings in you. You can want for it, but when you start seeing just social justice capitalized, trademark, like social justice, that you're probably going to run across something that like maybe that's just not going to fly in the end. Like
Yeah.
I'm a pretty progressive guy, but when I see it like couched like that, I'm like, oh no, here we go. So that'll be page 5 of this thing. But let's get to the rest of the meat and potatoes. All of these are just buzzwords that really don't mean anything to me. What does it mean that we have courage and strength and all that? Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
American love of freedom is an empty concept without our civil liberties. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Colorado is beautiful. That's a cheap pop. Let's see. Colorado's hardworking citizens help build this country. Okay. This still feels like preamble to me. We are of, by, and for all the people of Colorado. This platform is a testament to their hopes and hard work in the past and is dedicated to their future. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Stable Genius says that Styx Hexenhammer could give Nick Bravo a job in government. Nick Bravo's actually run for a job in government before. It didn't work out for him.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
What was it, the mayor of Arcata or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's run for more than I ever have. We'll put it that way. I've been a delegate for all the different levels except for the National Assembly.
Yeah.
And I think the mayor kind of outranks any of that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're getting to the meat and potatoes of it. First part, civil liberties. Universal beliefs. We support the provision by the government for the respect and protection of all nonviolent citizen protesters, including those participating in civil disobedience. Protesters should be protected from any and all use of excessive force by officers of the law. Thomas, you seeing this?
Yep.
Part 1, Item 1. It's like, holy shit. They're going for the gusto here. It's like, yeah, I don't think that officers of the law should be excessively forcing protesters. But is that really the first goddamn thing that we need to be thinking about? Is the safety of Occupy protesters?
Right.
I skimmed over this before I started this. I did, but I just got blown away. Like, holy shit. Is that really the first thing that we stand for? I'm like, I agree with what is being said. I just take issue with like the prioritization of it, like especially under human and civil rights. Like, is that the most important of all of human and civil rights to be like number one? Maybe they're not necessarily in order. I hope they're not. Right. Number 2, we support policies and laws that provide every child born in the United States equal access to the benefits of prenatal health care, preschool and early childhood development programs, quality schools, and other critical education and career development resources. Thomas?
Yep.
Do you support...
Do I support...
Do you support prenatal health care for children born in the United States?
You say prenatal health care.
For children born in the United States, yes.
Yeah, but what, like...
Prenatal care for children who are born. Do you support it?
Sure. I would say that's a good thing. No?
No, Thomas, it's not. Prenatal means before they're born. It says we support policies and laws that provide every child born in the United States prenatal health care.
To the benefits of prenatal health care.
Okay, so if this was a statement about immigration, right? And so a woman coming across the United States who is pregnant has her child born here, right?
Yeah.
That child should have access to everything that every other child has here because he is a citizen, right?
Right.
But if you, as written, it also is basically in support of before he was born here, he should have access to prenatal care. Like we should have.
How do you give access to how do you, like, when you say healthcare to someone who hasn't been born yet? Like, what? How can you do that?
Well,
like,
while they're in the womb, like it's not just when they get born here, right? It's if their mother is pregnant and crosses the border. We need to start giving them prenatal care so that when they're born here, they can be healthy.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
When I read this, I'm like really like scrutinizing it. I'm like, prenatal care for people born here?
I don't know how can you give prenatal care for someone who hasn't been born yet though? Like, what are they doing? Are they caring for the mother?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and say not something that I would vote against, but the implications I'm aware of. And that is basically immigrants are decriminalized if they're pregnant because we need to be giving them Don't restrict their access to prenatal care because that child within them is a future citizen, right?
Right.
I'm good. We're only on point two. Point three. We support affirmative action and public assistance programs to enhance equal access and strongly oppose measures that would eliminate current affirmative action programs.
Equal access. Are you supportive of affirmative action or no?
I'm not afraid of it. At its base, I do feel like it's just another expression of discrimination, only trying to be positive with it. It's got really good intentions to it, and when I look across just the Democratic Party as a delegate, I look at them and I'm like, why is this group still mostly silver-haired, partially balding white men? They have so much outreach for all these other demographics, and yet still they're dominated by white men. Old white, crusty, balding guys. And I'm about to be one of them in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why I support the affirmative action things is I just don't see anything that hurts me. It just helps other people. I'm absolutely not afraid of an affirmative action thing hurting me in any way.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily against it, but where I live, what I see happening is you have a lot of temp jobs and contract jobs that are floating around out there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people from other countries take those jobs when I know for a fact there's a lot of people around me who would work those jobs. They're not getting them now. It's these people from these other countries who are taking them because they'll come in here and they'll take that minimum wage job and they don't care as long as they're working in this country. They don't care. And slowly but surely, I know of people who will work minimum wage jobs and they're native born and they're willing to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it as, if you have more and more people in the country, wages go down. And that, you slowly erode little by little the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just my take on what I see, what's happening out there.
My Propter Hawk went in and he hasn't sent me any message, but I'm gonna send him the Hangout link anyway. PM to him. There it goes. My take on it is there are enough jobs. Right. All I have to do is bring up Indeed, right? And I can show you that there are plenty of jobs in every city. Maybe people need to retool a little bit in order to work them, but like there are good paying jobs that are posted, and people aren't filling them. And
but are those jobs like
yeah.
are those jobs like where you'd have to get trained like a college diploma or a trade of some kind, right?
Sometimes, and sometimes people have selected a job that becomes obsolete or becomes flooded, and they don't have the skills to get other jobs that are available. And we do need to be able to retool our people, you know. But as far as affirmative action, I'm just not afraid of it. You know, I feel like I have not done half the things I could have done to maintain any privilege as a white guy, and I still find it so easy to get employed.
To get a what?
To get a job, to get
Oh,
employed. I find it so easy.
but
You
you're
know,
probably, I don't know your background or your skill set, but you're probably well educated and you probably have some sort of trade or something in your background, right?
both.
Right. Well, but
Yes.
there, yeah, but I know, but there's a lot of people out there that don't have that and that don't have those skill sets. So they have to just, for them, taking those sort of, I don't know, what have I seen out there? I've seen a lot. There's a lot of general labor, manual labor jobs out there
Yeah.
on Indeed, lots of them, and those are sort of the ones that don't require a lot of skill, a lot of like a skill set of any kind, and that's where that in that area is where I see something like this potentially being hurt. If somebody's got a good skill set or trade, yeah, they in this country they should be okay. I don't. Yeah, it would
What
be
I've
hurt.
seen as far as the job market is, if you want a job, follow me. I as part of my job as an addiction counselor, I take people from rock bottom when they've lost everything, and I find them jobs every day, no matter what their race, creed, or religion is. It is so easy to get a job. A
Right.
career is a little bit harder to do,
Yeah.
but if you want a job, even a job that pays enough for a living wage, follow me. I will point you in the right direction. You know, I can't make a horse drink, but I can lead him to water. You know, I can take you down to say in my city, there are at least 4 or 5 distribution centers, like for Kroger's and for Safeway and for Walmart, where I can find people uh, a job doing a strange type of stand up forklift, making $18 an hour.
Are you talking about a reach truck operator?
Yeah.
I've actually worked that number of years ago. I was a reach truck operator.
Well, I can find that for $18 an hour.
Yeah.
Walk on. Now, the first week you don't get that because the training week, they don't pay that. They pay minimum wage. But every week thereafter, $18 an hour. Right? If you want a job because you need money, the jobs are out there. You know, I wish like every person had someone like me, or at least a social worker, you know, to be able to bounce ideas off of when they hit rock bottom. They don't know what to do. You know, there's so many different programs out there to help people get back up on their feet. I just am not afraid. I'm not afraid of giving people who we've identified as being a little bit more disadvantaged a little bit more of a push, because I actually, as a veteran, I have so many more opportunities than a lot of other uh, people of the same demographics. If it's another white person who has the same skills and education as me, and I'm the veteran and he's not, I'm probably going to get the job, right?
Yeah.
Just my veteran status. I've seen how it's kind of lifted my spirits knowing that I have that on my side. But do I feel like I beat out anyone to the point where they didn't get a job anywhere? No. Maybe I was selected for a job in particular over another person. But when I go out job searching, I put out resumes to like 10 different places, and I get a couple calls back. And I know that everyone else that's going up against me does the same. You know, and there's a glut of jobs. I hate when people talk about the jobs market as if it's like gloom and doom. Go on Indeed and just type in whatever type of career you'd like to have, and then hit enter. You know, and we're only on like the fourth thing now. Propter, thanks for joining us.
Hello, welcome. Greetings from Canada. First time caller. Big fan of the show, long time listener.
So, just to make a long story short, what I'm doing here is, you know how like there's politicians who vote on something without having read it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, in 2 days, I have to vote yes or no on this thing.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Because I'm a state delegate. I'm actually reading it, and I'm actually going over all of my thoughts about every line of the planks of the platform. Okay?
Okay.
And you can chime in too.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay. So, number 4, we support policies and laws that ensure that federal and local governments do not interfere with an individual's right to make decisions regarding their own death with dignity and self-determination.
So that's like the self-assisted suicide thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Or the, yeah.
I'm okay with that. Compassion and Choices is one of my favorite charities right now.
Mm-hmm.
They've really made that point to me. I filmed a couple of their speeches for the Freethinkers of Colorado Springs, so I'm totally on board with that one. I like number 4.
This is a hot topic here in the Great White North here, where it just seems like it's kind of an odd thing to have to vote on. It almost seems like it should be a natural right. Like you have, you know, just the concept that we don't have the right to exit gracefully with a medical, like, I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy to me that this is something that just isn't a natural right already.
Where do you? The thing about that is, don't you think that's kind of vague? Like, what are they talking about? Do you mean, like, just if somebody just wants to kill themselves? Like, just,
well, from
like,
what I
say, I'm depressed, I can't take it anymore, I'm going to go blow my brains out.
Well, what they've, at least here, I don't know, I imagine they're probably pretty similar positions, but I think it's if you have, at least in the case here, if you're going to get the medical assisted suicide thing, it's the, if you're suffering with a terminal disease that has where it's certain that you're going to suffer and it's just going to be an increased sort of regiment of suffering and suffering and suffering, you have the right to, or what's being proposed is you have the right to check out, as opposed to just enduring that suffering and just leave this mortal coil with a more, I guess.
I only ask that,
I appreciate Thomas's perspective though, because each one of these has unintended consequences once we push them forward. And
right.
What Thomas is showing is this could be applied to somebody who just had a bad day.
Or I remember, I think it was Agent of Doubt. I think it was you that had a video once where you were talking. I can't remember the girl's name, but it was some 14-year-old girl. She live streamed her suicide on Facebook where she hung herself.
Yes.
And she claimed that she was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. I mean, like that kind of suicide, you know.
Yeah, there would have to be. I mean, this is just sort of like the planks, the footnotes. I guess they don't really go into the. I would have to look at the official policy to see what kind of
like the age range and
one of the things.
Mental health.
Yeah, I don't think you could just jump in there and check out and say, hey, you know what? I had a bad week at school, and I want to get the shot. I think there's certain things, and there's a at least from here. I mean, I'm just going by that policy as it's presented here. It could be different in Colorado, But from what I understand, is it's an ongoing process where you have to repeatedly and vocally express that this is what you want. This is, in fact, a process you want to go through, and there's a lot of provisions, and there's all kinds.
If it's an adult, I'm not totally against it, right? But I mean, if a girl is 14,
yeah,
who allegedly was sexually assaulted by her stepfather, I don't think she's in.
What's strange is I have the power vested in me by the state of Colorado to put a mental health hold on someone, especially if they were intoxicated in front of me and they said that they wanted to kill themselves while they were drunk. I can put a mental health hold on them, and I don't feel like the writers of this plank thought that they were going to remove that right from me, or that responsibility from me, to do that to someone. To say, no, you're not going anywhere because you just said that you're suicidal and you're drunk.
Right.
Right. My purview actually only extends to those people who are intoxicated or are in withdrawal.
Yeah, in an altered state of mind where they can do something dangerous with under the influence. Or
if somebody outside of that said that they were suicidal to me, I would just refer them to a doctor who would immediately put an M1 hold on them. Mm-hmm. And they'd be held for 3 days in an emergency room. Right?
Right.
While they were still being assessed by psychiatrists, and then probably placed in some place where they would get the help that they need. I don't think that the person who wrote this intended to remove that entire system from those of us who treat acutely suicidal people. You know?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other concern with that sort of stuff is what kind of opportunities does this open up for, say, insurance companies, where they're like, you know what, we're getting kind of tired of paying for this guy. He's on the dole. He's been sick for 8 years. He's kind of expensive. He's not particularly he's not exactly contributing to the cause here. How about we do the moral thing and check this guy out, like, in terms of like insurance companies and outside.
If they told the guy, we're not going to pay for the treatment that does not look like it's going to work anyway, but we will pay for the death pill. Right.
Or they even get even more aggressive and start going after family and say, look, if you continue with this, your X person in your family is going to lose this benefit to, just the usual sort of rope-a-dope insurance tactics that they like to pull once people get cozy with things. So I could see where there'd be concerns with things like that, like in insurance companies, maybe people that I don't know. I think, from what I understand, I think the person has to consent to it. I think that's ultimately one of the real contingencies on that, is that the person has to give explicit and ongoing consent repeatedly throughout a certain trial period before they could do anything with that. So I don't know what it's like out there, but I think that's, from what I understand, the sort of cliff notes of how they've proposed it here.
I don't think. I just feel like I understand what their intent is, and it isn't any of the unintended consequences that we're foreseeing. And I feel like they're just saying, let's not make someone live and suffer, with a terminal illness. I feel like that's what they're saying. So I'm not going to vote against it.
Now, when they sent this to you, or gave you this, was it like a package that actually contained the full expanded explanations of the policies, or did they just is this basically all you got? Was this basically almost a flyer?
This is 23 pages.
Okay. But there's no explanations, like they don't
line by line. There's no explanation for each. There's no breakdown It's these 23 pages that I'm voting on exactly as written.
Yeah, that's kind of hokey.
I know, because each one of these things, has an entire discussion you could have about it.
Yeah, that's
Plank 5. We support legislation that prevents local, state, and federal governments from using eminent domain, including the definition of blight, to usurp property rights for the economic gain of private individual, corporation, or organization. I can go along with that, but I think the unintended consequence I would see from this being widespread throughout our legal system would be, what about homeowners associations? If they are trying to get rid of blight on a property, and they fine a person, and the person can't pay the fines, what then?
yeah.
I also, because of my background with protesters, think, what about laws that try to sweep homeless people away from the sidewalks in front of expensive malls downtown? Do we just let the malls get overrun?
That really,
the whole eminent domain thing. What if there's a homeless encampment that they want to pave in order to create another shopping mall? There's all sorts of things that you have to weigh, basically, on a situational basis. I don't want to see anyone lose their home for the purpose of some corporation wants the land so that they can make a giant apartment complex, and they need that one person's home. I don't think that eminent domain should be able to force someone to sell. I don't think that fair market value even covers those problems that people run into. I think that if there's one holdout on a block and a developer really wants that land, they need to pay what that person wants to sell it for, not a fair market value. They shouldn't have eminent domain making it inevitable that they have to give up their land, because that ruins their house value.
Yeah, it's the railroads all over again, basically.
Yeah.
It just strikes me as odd that this is, I mean, it's basically broken down like universal beliefs. This is the planks of the structure that they're building on, and this is the fifth point. Like, the priorities here are just absolutely wonky. Like the order, like, I'm just sort of reading these things, and it's like I get that that's a position, but that seems more like a page 18 position on bullet points.
If I was an Occupy protester, I would completely understand getting to this on page 1.
Now, I guess it's a regional thing too. Like, is this something that's an ongoing problem in Colorado, that they're usurping property, and this is why this is such a so high in the priorities?
The biggest part of that was the Pinyon Canyon military expansion with Fort Carson. There were people who lost their farms to the military taking it for having more land to do maneuvers on. But other than that, I haven't heard anything about eminent domain being used to take anyone's land.
Yeah, that's strange. I haven't heard anything like I know that stuff. I know it happens, but it doesn't seem like something like, if you're sort of gonna boil things down to 5 or 6 bullet points in a universal belief sort of strategy, then it just seems strange that one would be in there. I can think of many planks that would probably be better suited to that prioritized spot in that list. That seems really like this is really a strange layout that they've got here.
Number 6, we support the development of policies and laws that ensure informed consent for the release of information related to physical and mental health issues. Something that directly involves my line of work as far as privacy and confidentiality. I get that, but I have a very niche job. Why are they talking about privacy in physical and mental health on page 1?
Yeah, that's odd. And now I just sort of thinking on the spot here, but how would that relate to things like, let's say, they like mental health checks for getting a gun? Like, what if the person says, well, I have a right to access this. I do not consent to, let's say, whatever bureau is responsible for digging up the stuff, that they say, I do not consent to that bureau contacting my psychologist or psychiatrist and accessing this information. How would that conflict? Because it seems to me like when you're saying everything that you're setting a structure that's contingent on informed consent. How does that work for outside things like that?
If it's just somebody who has had a mental health condition that was treated by a private doctor, or even a doctor paid for by government funds, if it never reached a court, then HIPAA is involved and confidentiality of their medical records is involved. But for those people who have had their civil liberties stripped from them by court proceeding or by someone like me putting a mental health hold on them, there are records of that are by law shared with certain organizations that could be researched outside of your medical records.
Right.
So if I put someone on a 5-day hold for alcoholism because I believe that they're going to die if they leave the premises, the last copy of that carbon copy form that comes from the state actually does get filed somewhere. And if that person ever tries to join the military, they have to answer yes to the whole question of, have I ever been placed on a mental health hold?
Right.
And that same question, I imagine, would appear on background checks for guns. I've never had a background check for a gun, so I don't know. But the next step from that, be it somebody who's suicidal on one hold or on a alcoholism hold for me, is if their family goes to a judge and presses for an involuntary commitment, that's like a step further than the hold that I put them on. And they could be held on that style of hold, the involuntary commitment, indefinitely, depending on what their situation is. It could be at least a year, right, that they're put into mental health facilities. But a judge is involved. A gavel hits the desk, There is a record, a public record that can be looked up. And it is not in your health records. That's your family went to a judge to petition for your commitment. And so there's all sorts of things people can look up that are outside of your actual medical records that would be indicators.
Right.
Here in Colorado, if you've ever owned a red card, which before we had recreational marijuana, we had medical marijuana for 10 years. And people had to get a red card, which was a prescription from a doctor in order to be able to use cannabis to treat their illnesses. Written into the laws about getting a red card was if you ever get a red card, you can't own a gun. So everybody who decided to smoke pot before it became recreationally available, and they went to a doctor to get a prescription, they won't pass a background check in our state.
Wow, that's a
But
nifty
people-
little trick.
people that go to a recreational marijuana dispensary now, you just show your ID to get in, and then you buy it and you leave. There's no like record of who bought what that is
Right.
saved. So the whole people getting red cards in order to get pot, the only reason they do it now is to get a discount.
Hmm.
And those are the people who really need the discount, who are actually treating actual real problems and not just people seeking to get high. But they still would lose their rights that way to own a gun.
Yeah,
But
that's slippery, huh? That's
Yeah.
slimy.
but the registry for the red card dropped dramatically when it just became available recreationally. So basically the database that they have is like a 10-year window into who's using pot.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so those people don't pass a background check. But people who turn 21 nowadays, they don't go for a red card if they're wanting to partake. They just go buy it. So those people would pass the background check.
Yeah, that's it's just, it seems so inconsistent. That seems really convoluted and slippery. Like they really cooked that one up.
Yeah.
That's
As
crazy.
far as like a further literal reading of this line 6, it reminds me of a certain stage of what I have to do with a client on the first meeting with a client. When we're doing an intake with them, I put a confidentiality form in front of them that says basically the educational level of everyone who they might have to work with while they're in that facility, and also the titles that they have, the credentials that they have, and the understanding that there are only a few things that you can say to me that I can break confidentiality on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a form that I put in front of someone, and I try to explain it the best that I can, right? And if I think that they don't understand, I will go over it like really in depth. But for some people who are very intelligent and they just want to sign papers without even looking at it, I might say, this is your confidentiality form. Sign here, and we don't talk about your business outside of here.
Right.
And I just give them that simplified version. And I'm handing them a form with bullet points, like step by step, all of these other rights that they have. And they don't even want to read it, you know?
Jeez.
And like, I want to slow people down sometimes, but they just want to grab the form and sign it. So
yeah.
I think that some of the things that I've done in order to make sure that people understand what they're signing is what they're talking about here. Supporting the development of policies, to ensure that people are informed about consent for the release of information. If I have to go beyond the confidentiality form and make an ROI for someone, a release of information for someone, say we want to be able to talk to their mom about their mental health status,
Mm-hmm.
I do go far more in depth with my explanation then. I'm like, just to be sure, dude, we get to talk to your mom about your mental health, and whatever she says to us, we can then tell her, stuff about you as well here, and compare notes as far as what you've said to us if you sign this paper. I make sure that they understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But the initial confidentiality, I feel like a lot of people just they breeze through it. In hospitals, nobody reads that shit.
Yeah, which is crazy, especially in the States there. Like, you know, read the small print and it's like, and an additional $100,000 goes to this particular uh, unit of the hospital. Should you sign this agreement? And then people are just like, yeah, sign it. That sounds good. But like, you never know what's in these things. And
there's some of the things that are exceptions to the rule for confidentiality. When they actually do pop up, people get pissed when they find out that I'm not going to keep them in confidence when they say they're going to kill somebody else, or when they say they're going to kill themselves, or when they say that there was a child who was abused.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mandatory reporter.
Yeah, because
that's on the confidentiality statement, right? And so they should have understood that. But if they just grab all the forms and sign them with somebody else before I even get to that client, and that person didn't stop and make them understand all that stuff, and then they just start dumping information about elderly abuse happening in their household, I do try to stop people. I say, look, if you start talking about this, I gotta inform the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you go there,
external threats and the like, right?
Well, especially elderly abuse and child abuse are they're exceptions to the confidentiality rule. I have to report it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. That makes sense.
Yeah, so they don't understand it when they do it.
Did you guys talk about number 5?
Yeah, we did. What do you want to talk about?
Isn't that wasn't Donald Trump trying to use eminent domain for the wall to build?
Yeah, but not in Colorado.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to understand this body of work in the context in which it was written, and it was written for Coloradans.
Okay, so all right, so it doesn't apply for, I guess, yeah, all right.
But I would understand in New Mexico if this was one of their planks that they're probably intending it to disrupt the building of a wall.
Yeah.
I think we're on to women, gender equity, and reproductive rights.
Can I just say something about number 1 here before you do, Mike?
Sure.
We support this is really strange. We support the provision of the government for the respect and protection of all nonviolent citizen protesters, including those participating in civil disobedience. Is this like state-approved civil disobedience? It seems kind of like the language of that seems. I mean, forget the fact that this is number 1 in the planks in the order, which is just absolutely astonishing. But it's there's a point to civil disobedience that it's kind of like not state sanctioned.
Yeah, and I think you're coming across the same realization that I was when I read that plank for the first time a couple minutes ago, and that was this whole thing might have been written by Occupy protesters.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it might have been.
Yeah, it is very shocking to me as well. And before you joined us, I was like, how the hell is this point number 1?
Yeah, and in the way they phrased it too, as well, we support the provision by the government for the respect. I mean, I can understand saying respecting the rights of protesters, but the way this is phrased, it's to respect the protesters themselves. It's like the phrasing is very, it's very ambiguous. It's very slippery in that sense, where it doesn't say for the government to respect the rights of and protection of. It says for the government to respect and protection. There's something about that phrasing that seems like they don't necessarily have to respect the protesters as a movement or as a political entity. I mean, they can respect their rights to have that, but I mean, it's almost like, no, the government has to respect the protesters themselves? Like, I don't know, just something about that phrasing. Like for something that's supposed to be an official plank, it seems kind of.
If you're going to be respecting and protecting civil disobedience, imagine this is a very real world thing that happens here. The protesters go walk right out onto the interstate and block traffic.
Mm-hmm.
If this next plank you have here says protesters should be protected from any and all use of excessive force by officers of the law, does that mean that they shouldn't throw tear gas on the road to clear it so that cars can go by?
Yeah.
Does that mean that if they lock arms and they look really, really serious, that they really want to block the traffic, that police officers shouldn't pull their arms apart?
Yeah.
And when they do so, should they not be using wrist locks that apply pressure to their wrists
Mm-hmm.
in order to break their arm chain? Should their arm chain be respected because they really, really believe in what they're fighting for? Or should we have the right of way on the interstate protected? Because that actually is a real world problem that we have with our protesters here in Denver, is that the Capitol building is just a couple blocks away from I-25.
Right.
And they've done that with a couple huge protests. They just walk right out onto the interstate and block it.
Yeah. And that's dangerous too. I mean, it just puts so many people at risk. It seems that doesn't really,
and it affects a lot more lives than the people who would disagree with them. You got people that agree with their cause that can't get to their job.
Yeah, not to mention you needlessly clutter up major road arteries where emergency vehicles might need that as routes and stuff. So that just seems like it's really, that is yeah, I don't know about that first one. That one's that one's pretty flimsy. And it's number one too. Like this is the first thing we got to address of all the things that we have.
All the things, yes.
That's well, that's special. That's for sure.
Okay. Women, gender equity, and reproductive rights. Number one, we support the Equal Rights Amendment and enactment and enforcement of laws addressing the inequalities women face.
Well, they just kind of tailored the language in that one to pander right to a specific demographic. I mean, they really.
Well, the whole subsection for this is women, gender equity, and reproductive rights. So, yeah. As written, it's so vague that I can't do anything but approve.
Yeah, they really don't get down to the nitty gritty. It's like, well, forget the fact that we have, 17 bills that this is contingent on that you're not going to get to read, by the way, before you vote on this. That's that's super duper. I like that. So we'll just do the usual like vague thing. It's like, yeah, that's it really says nothing. And it seems to be a trend within these bullet points is they're so vague. They're like most people would read them and say, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. And it's like, yeah, but can we read the actual policy that this is acting as a sort of makeshift umbrella for? Because when we get to the details matter in these sort of things,
Number two, we support the protection of a woman's right to have a choice in all aspects of her body and health.
So that's like the pro-abortion thing. That's right thing.
Well, it's supposed to be more encompassing than that, but yeah, this is pro-choice.
Mm-hmm. Well, they just covered all the bases. They said all aspects. They're like, well, it's just. Yeah.
Except there are certain things that I have seen that all aspects does not cover.
So what you're saying is all aspects doesn't mean all aspects.
Like, does this cover late-term abortions?
I'd imagine if it says all, I'd imagine that pretty much covers that as well. I mean, it's just so non-specific that, I mean, the way it's framed there.
Well, it says she's got a right to have a choice. Well, if that's not an option, then she can't choose it. You know. But some of the things that I've seen that this sort of a principle does not apply to would be people who are said to not be able to consent because of the situation they're in, be it that they're too young, or they are mentally handicapped, or they are prisoners in the criminal justice system who are getting freaky with either other prisoners or prison guards. There's a lot of different things where we would not support women's right to have a choice.
Well, sure.
Because they're deemed to not be capable of making that decision for themselves.
Well, think of the language that's used here as well. It doesn't say health. It sort of assumes that people are reading this in terms of positive decisions towards positive health. But what does this mean? It's like support the protections of one right to have a choice in all aspects of her body and health. So that means, well, what if she chooses to do heroin? Could you still put a couple days on her to sort of put a hold on her so she can't go and do something that would kill herself? I mean, that would, there's health doesn't just mean all the good things. Health also means bad choices as well. And when you say we support the protection of those decisions, we're also including that other entire category of things. I mean, it's so vague that it just seems.
And there absolutely are absolutists who would say, yes, whatever somebody wants to put in their veins, we should let them.
Mm-hmm.
And they do exist, these people that believe that.
So how would that affect somebody like you, that in your profession? So it's like, well, she's choosing to drink, and it's like, well, she's already divulged information that she's going to kill herself.
Well, I recently did have a discussion with someone who one of the things that is different about me in my profession is that I started with a degree in psychology and not a degree in social work.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very big divide between those two backgrounds, where I've recently had to have a conversation with someone where they said, who am I to tell a person that it's wrong for him to be drinking mouthwash to get drunk? That's a life decision that he's made for himself. And I need to respect that, he makes these decisions rationally. And my response to that was that I'm a fucking addiction counselor.
And that you know that these things have.
And it's not my job to normalize people ingesting poison, especially poison with a poison control hotline number on the side of it. But there are people who drink mouthwash because it is cheaper than alcohol.
Oh, we had somebody
on the streets, and they make this decision, that they are okay with the extra additives of mouthwash because they want to get that drunk and they want it cheap.
Oh yeah, well out here we had not. This was a couple of years ago. They pulled somebody over that was drinking hand sanitizer. It's like, are we gonna give that the rubber stamp too? Like, is this take a drive and enjoy a little of the old Purell? It's like, that's lunacy. Like, why would anyone support that? I mean, it just makes no sense. And the thing is that just if you look at how these things, how vague they are, and just the immediate contradictions that you can see in other aspects and other legislation that are taking affirmative positions and things, this is almost laughable. Like the lack of detail and the vagueness of this is abysmal.
Yeah. But the understanding that what I think they mean here is they're only writing about this in the context of abortion rights. I would go ahead and be in favor of this, because this isn't the law. This is the party platform.
Right, right.
The
But they
laws,
wanted,
the laws have to be a lot more detailed for me to be in favor of them.
yeah, yeah,
But I understand what they're trying to get at is abortion.
yeah. That's they. In so many words, I think that's the implication here.
Number 3, we believe all people should have access to affordable, safe, and legal reproductive health care, including abortion, and should not be infringed on by the anyone. I just read that.
Who's the anyone?
That is bad grammar. Should
But-
not be infringed on by the anyone.
Yeah, that's. I mean, this is just.
Oh my
this
goodness.
This is laughable.
Uh,
Like this is official. Like this is an official thing to vote on here. This is a party plank. I mean, this is
yeah.
this is unbelievable. Like I can't believe what I'm reading. And I mean, I've seen some. Well, maybe we got enough wonky stuff out here in Canada. I assure you that. This is it's wow. Can I say that? This is wow.
As far as what I feel like they're trying to get at, I do think that there is a push by the conservatives in my state to create clinics that try to mimic everything that Planned Parenthood does except for abortion. And they try to even like take the funding for a certain area and get a share of it and take it away from Planned Parenthood by being another provider in order to try to limit Planned Parenthood doing anything but abortion as far as what they're doing for paying the bills, you know. And there is that, like, especially in Colorado Springs, they were building it right next door. The clinic that people would go to that does not offer abortion. But they don't say that up front. You know, they're basically trying to kill off Planned Parenthood by any means necessary because of the whole abortion thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, understanding that there is a battle that's being fought, I would be in favor of voting for this, even with the horrible grammar.
Mm-hmm. And the redundancy. I mean, the first one
Yeah.
kind of implies, like the second bullet point implies the third.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of redundant to have two specific things, like to be vague in bullet point 2 to basically behave as an umbrella for all of these other things, these other implications, and then in part 3 to start to articulate those specific things as a separate bullet point. It just seems really redundant to me. I mean,
Okay, so number 4 says we believe all people of Colorado must have affordable, safe, legal, and confidential access to the full range of reproductive health services. And it really does seem redundant, doesn't it?
we really are, yeah. We're just really kind of towing. We're just repeating the same bullet point in
They did
different
add
phrasing.
confidential. And if you mean all people, then that would be a 14-year-old who gets pregnant, doesn't have to tell her parents, and can go get an abortion without her parents' consent.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the intended consequence is. That's not unintended. That's
Right.
exactly what they mean.
Yeah, it gets worse. The more you unpack that, the worse it really
Yeah.
gets, and it's just really capricious to phrase it like this and sort of organize these bullet points. It's like, yeah, I don't know what to make of that. That's it's almost infantile how they've written this. It's kind of depressing.
Number 5, we support strong United States leadership and active participation in the international efforts to improve conditions and eliminate abuses of all women.
Yeah, that's okay. Well,
I like that one. The it's vague, but
well, it sounds very, jingoistic. It has a very we support the good things, and people are like, yes, we also support the good things. It's like, okay, well, but what does this mean? Like, what exactly? Well, I guess that's really the question. What does it actually mean? It sounds good. I mean, the phrasing of it sounds, like we should all be on board. But it's like, well, if it's just like it's essentially a platitude. Like, these aren't the party planks. It's like, this is the party platitudes.
Yeah. Women in Saudi Arabia just got the ability to drive, and that was like a huge news thing that went around for like 3 days.
Yeah, the 3 days.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
3 days.
We don't want to get too excited about that. It's like 3 days, and
But
okay.
there are certain cultures that we don't look at when we're looking for conditions that need to improve and abuses that need to be eliminated, because well, this is the party that is open to all different cultures, and so we accept a lot of the abuses that we should.
Yeah,
And
that's
to think that there are so many other things that women need to be having in Saudi Arabia besides the ability to drive, and they're not getting it, and we're not going to even touch that. As far as our international efforts, those women are now invisible for until something else happens that is good for them, that just happens to happen because the Saudi king says so on a whim. We're not going to see any movements on our part against the Saudis. That's just not happening.
Yeah, and it kind of goes against the other argument too, where people also make the in terms of war and other various types of interventions, because this isn't specific, doesn't say excludes specific interventions. It basically says we support strong United States leadership and active participation in international efforts. I mean, that could mean anything, frankly. So
yeah,
how does that stack up against an argument, for example, like say that we don't have the right to go to war with another country and impose our values because that culture is different than ours and they have the right to live within their culture? Does this also, there's an implication here that's not really, it's like, okay, well, you United States leadership and active participation. It's like, well, how much is that going to infringe on other arguments and other positions that would be anti-interventionist or anti-international? Like, some people would have a more protectionist thing, saying we don't have the right to influence other cultures. We don't have the right to, and some people just outright deplore the Western values and say, well, why would we want to support the right or the sort of intervention on these other countries? There's a lot of arguments that this sort of vague phrasing could contrast with, and I think that's on top of saying nothing, it kind of just raises issues. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, people like the sound of it. It's very, I don't know how many people would be against that sort of thing. Kind of almost reminds me a bit of the joke on Family Guy, when they were doing the 9/11 thing, where everything they were saying was absolutely bombing until they said like 9/11, and then people just started clapping. It's like, it's almost at that level of platitudiness. That's
The next one, religious liberties. We're committed to the principle of the separation of church and state as set forth in the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no laws favoring the establishment of religion nor prohibit the free practice of one's religious beliefs or lack thereof.
Well, they were pretty specific in that, weren't they?
Yeah. And then number 2, we oppose religious exemption laws, legislation, and ballot initiatives which mask discrimination as religious beliefs.
And I like how this is under the religious liberties under that category. It's like, it's not non-liberties, it's liberties. These are the liberties they have. They have the right to not do this and not do this. But I see where they're going.
Now, unintended consequence wise, for number two, the Democratic Party is not the party that normally decries things like the specter of Sharia law.
Mm-hmm.
But when we say we oppose religious exemption laws, and there is that separate body of Sharia law that would handle things within their own community,
Mm-hmm.
And that is the practice of their religion.
Yeah, and
It's something where like we're not thinking about all the different scenarios when we write these things, are we?
no, they certainly aren't. There's a multitude of implications that each one of these bullet points has that I think they bear mentioning. They don't do well in umbrella statements. That's for sure.
And also, just as far as what we've already read, we're supposed to be in favor of affirmative action, right?
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, such as Judaism or Islam, you might have a race and a religion coincide with each other, correlate to each other. And if we're going to have affirmative action, then we are basically going against these two religious liberties planks right here.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to make sure that we're hiring enough Jews and enough Muslims?
Yeah, and at which rate the irony is that is a discriminatory process. You are literally taking people based on unmutable characteristics and putting them into a category. So when you exit the merit aspect and you start to hire based solely on immutable characteristics, you are in fact discriminating. I mean, there's no way around that sort of thing. I mean, that's a kind of a clumsy term as well, because discrimination happens. Like if you apply for a job and you don't get hired, I mean, technically that is a discrimination where the person said, you're not fit for the job, somebody is better. Like there's a certain element of discrimination in that. So that, like, just the whole sort of clumsiness of that it's not a compelling bullet point.
Yeah. The next one is people with disabilities and the ADA. We demand that the immediate and full implementation of laws to provide improved access to housing, transportation, medical assistance, education, and employment for those with any and all disabilities. And number two, we oppose any legislation that would weaken the Americans with Disabilities Act. I know that there are arguments about the Americans with Disabilities Act and how it could hinder certain business entities, but it is so rare, and it's like at this point, I just feel like it's Koch brothers propaganda that they might pay for to be put out on like libertarian publications. But really, I don't see anything wrong with requiring that hotels have a certain berth to the doors of the bathroom so that people in wheelchairs can get in there.
Yeah, it's a general accessibility to resources thing.
Demanding that all public places have a ramp so that someone with a wheelchair can get on there, can get in the building, and every floor has to be accessible some way by somebody with a wheelchair. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that seems like it's pretty cogent.
I mean, I don't feel like it's been putting an unfair burden on anything that isn't something that I'm willing to go along with. It might be costing someone somewhere, somebody might be costing me as a taxpayer some money, but I'm okay with making things more accessible. One of these days, I might be that guy in the wheelchair.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty decent one. I don't think there's any problems with that.
Uh-oh.
Oh wow, gee, boy, now we got 10 bullet points on this one. They're like, well,
Yes.
now it's time to start unpacking things and being a little more specific.
The LGBTQ community. And why they settled on this acronym for LGBTQ, I mean, there's all the other different versions of it. I don't know.
Yeah,
we have-
usually.
Did we have to have a vote on which acronym we were going to use?
Well, I know out here it's LGBTQ2SAA plus is like the general accepted abbreviated acronym. But like some people still say LGTB, and that's considered discriminatory because it excludes all these other categories, and so they didn't put the plus. They didn't cover themselves by putting in the plus after the Q, so that could be problematic.
When I went to college, it was LGBTQIA. The I was for intersex, and the A was for asexual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know there's a couple P's in there too. Like,
well, wait, the A was also for ally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was 2 A's and there's the 2 P's. There's pansexual, polysexual. I mean, it's actually it's full glory. It's it's a pretty long acronym. In fact, we had a reporter that a liberal reporter here recently that went on Tucker Carlson, and he lost his job as a mainstream broadcaster because that's kind of vague. I mean, he didn't lose it. They didn't say he lost it because of that, but he lost it after that discussion with and he was promoting it, but he made a whole bunch of remarks like, because Tucker Carlson pushed on him and said, like, well, what is this? What did he say? Two-spirit mean? He said, like, do you know what that means? And this guy his name is Stephen LeDrew.
Uh-huh.
And he basically said, well, that just means that somebody doesn't know whether they're frick or frack, fish or fowl. And, that started obviously an outrage because people were like, well, that's not, we don't like that explanation. So there's actually a lot of politics, at least here, there's a lot of, that's a very sensitive thing. This acronym is actually, it's actually a topic of hot discussion where people can get into some trouble if they don't give full consideration to that. So it seems strange that that's just kind of phrased like that.
To be fair, I had already graduated from college when I learned what twin-spirited people were.
Mm-hmm.
It did not come up at all.
Yeah, it's an ongoing sort of process where we discover these interesting subcategories. I mean, I don't think anybody knows them all. There's a lot of them. The acronym, I think the full thing, it's like 16 or 17 letters. I mean, at this point, it's not even an abbreviation. It's kind of its own thing to have to memorize.
Number 1, we support measures that promote equality for and non-discrimination against gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in all aspects of their lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think most people would vote against that. It's just like, what does that mean exactly? Like, what is this?
Equality.
Yeah, well, I mean, that could mean, I've heard several definitions of that term. Whenever I hear it I'm kind of curious as to what exactly or how that term's being used.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the way it's framed again, this is kind of really, all the good things. It's sort of platitudey.
Number 2, we support the right of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals to obtain legal documents like a birth certificate, government identification cards, etc., that match their gender identity without medical procedures, court ruling, or other cost-prohibitive and personally degrading process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess that means that they can change official documents. I'm guessing that's the whole not having to conform to the gender you were assigned at birth argument.
Yeah. Well, but also, like, you don't have to show that a judge said it's okay for you to be a different gender to go change the gender on your driver's license. You just go down there and pay like a $3 fee to get your card printed a different way.
So what happens if this is an ongoing process with somebody? Because gender fluidity obviously is a thing. What if they want to change their license and their birth certificates every month or every year? I mean, is the state going to just take on that cost?
Well, I feel like they should have to spend, just as much as it costs to make that change. But, nothing like prohibitive to the point where, like, we're not, to the point where we'd be charging them more than the administrative cost of actually doing it. Okay. Let them do it.
And what is gender non-conforming? I mean, what does that? Okay, so what do they write gender non-conforming on there? Like, or do they put like a symbol? Like, how do they make that distinction? Because other people, I mean, when you're transgender, you're transitioning from one gender to another. That's kind of self-explanatory. But when you're non-conforming to any conception of gender, what do we check? Which box do we check? Just non-conforming? Is that just the category it goes under?
Yeah.
Okay. That seems odd. I mean,
for our driver's licenses, they would just not put an MRNF, put nothing.
Yeah.
Leave it blank.
Yeah.
I think that the unintended consequence here is that it might hinder law enforcement if they're not able to get a good description of somebody that they're looking for.
It makes the description.
But I feel in a way it actually helps the law enforcement if they know that they're looking for a gender non-conforming person rather than a male or a female in those cases.
Well, in a sense, you're kind of forcing them to profile as well.
Yeah.
Because the implication there is, well, if they're not male, they're not female. Who are we going to look for? They're going to look for somebody that fits. They're going to start counting on stereotypes and these other sort of.
Keep an open mind.
Yeah,
you could be walking into anything.
Yeah.
Number 3, we support our military personnel and demand that all members can serve openly, including our transgender and non-gender and gender non-conforming service members. This is one that I support this, right? Well, what happens when you join the military is you get health coverage for free, right? So basically, somebody who can't afford to have a transgender surgery could then just join the army and then have the government pay for it. That could become their plan in the future, that like people would just join the military in order to get their healthcare done. And I've seen this go as far as people complaining that they had trouble breathing through their nose when they were running in order to get a nose job from the military, and it works.
Wow.
Right. And that was just like a tiny aspect of it. But if we allow people who are transgender and gender non-conforming into the military, that if they choose that they need hormone replacement therapy to be the different gender, where our government's paying for it. Right.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of that. That one is tricky.
And
For sure.
the thing is, there are so many different medical states that you can have, uh, medical conditions that you can have that the military would not accept you for having just because it costs so much to treat it.
Hmm.
If you have flat feet, the military will not take you.
Right. Yeah. So it's
So
strange because
the reason why is because it would cost money to give you a surgery to try to treat it, and it makes you run slower and whatnot. Messing with someone's hormones does change their ability to grow muscle, you know, and would affect their ability to run just as much. I know because I had issues in the military myself where I had to have some hormone replacement, right?
and that has a profound effect on other things
Yes.
too. Yeah.
And so, like, this would be putting transgender people ahead of other people who have other medical problems.
Yeah. That seems like a
The
special.
reason that the service is not taking them is because it costs money to pay for their health care. And as part of the screening, anyone who has those conditions, they're just not going to take on the military. And then you're going to say, oh, but the exception is we're going to allow people who want a sex change that costs however much it costs.
See, I guess the way around this would be that you just have a universal standard that it's just non-applicable where people that pass whatever checks and balances you put in place are qualified to serve. So if there's specific things where there's certain expectations and there's certain things, as long as the person checks all those boxes, that they're qualified to join, I guess. I mean,
Okay. Well, if you had someone who was deaf because they needed hearing aids and an implant would give them the ability to hear, would it be the same thing that we would allow them to join because then the army would just pay for the medical procedure to put the implant in?
well, I would think that would be the sort of gateway to entry thing, that they wouldn't be qualified to join the military if they had that particular disability. If that's one of the qualifications, like if hearing is something that's a mandatory expectation, then they wouldn't get in the first place and exploit that sort of thing, I would imagine. As opposed to saying, well, we have to take X amount of deaf people and we'll fund whatever procedure they need to assist that medically. So it's very strange when you start to get into the nuts and bolts of this, isn't it?
It is. Personally, I feel like there should be more chapters to civil service, like in the vein of AmeriCorps, like Bill Clinton had envisioned. And I feel like besides just the 5 branches of the military, we should have an AmeriCorps. We should have a bunch of different civil service options. And I don't feel like we should kick anyone out of the military for not meeting some certain standards. Like for me personally, I had a very hard time with the running standard after my thyroid basically withered away to nothing, and I needed pills every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw some people that were just overweight, period, that could uh, do all the push-ups, do all the sit-ups, and do the run in enough time to pass, and they would still be kicked out of the military because they were overweight,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what I saw when that happened, the one soldier that pops into my mind right now, his name was Private Bear, right? Bear was spelled like Baer,
Mhm.
right? He was about 300 pounds, and he was about 6'2", and he could pass the physical fitness test, but he was put on the Fat Boy program where he had to lose like 2 pounds a month, and he would lose these pounds and then slip up one month and gain back like 20, and
Jeez.
then he'd be put on restriction, and then all he had to do was lose 2 pounds each month following that. So he basically wasn't losing any weight at all. Like 2 steps forwards, 3 steps back all the time. And
Mhm.
finally, they kicked him out of the army. And what I noticed was there were women who were 4'8" and weighed about 110 pounds soaking wet, right? Passed their physical fitness test, right? Same as him. Some of them with flying colors, some of them just barely. But all of them were allowed to stay in versus this 300-pound, 6'2" guy who could pass the PT test. And I'm like, give both of them a bayonet. Start them on opposite set ends of a football field and have them run at each other. Which one are you going to put money on?
Yeah.
Right? But the fat guy gets kicked out. And so I got this this principle within me that I don't think anyone should be kicked out of the military for not meeting any of the standards. I just think that they should have extra training allotted to them, even regardless of whether they actually ever achieve the standard. If they don't make the standard, just put extra training on them. Like if you're too fat, then you get 1 hour of extra exercise every day until you're not. And if you never make that, well, then you're just going to have 1 hour of extra exercise every day for the rest of your service.
Mhm.
And let them stay in.
Yeah, because it seems like it's an arbitrary standard anyway. What they're
And
doing is,
sometimes the standard weakens the military.
yeah, and the other thing too is, you see, it's the other thing too is it's really a difficult thing to deny somebody the right to serve their country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a difficult thing to wrap your head around. So when you have these sort of blanket discriminatory things where it's like, well, these people can't serve, or like somebody that's flat-footed, like you mentioned before, it's like, well, they can't serve their country. It's like, well, maybe they can't serve, frontline infantry or,
Yeah,
but
but maybe they can fly a plane.
right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's other places that are going to be in need of it. It just seems like to turn somebody down for something that specific and kind of inconsequential in other aspects, it seems really
Well,
clumsy to me.
I'm coming around to like all of this, but I would just say as a blanket statement, there are parts of the way that our government is formed, uh, and one of them being that we don't use our military to do infrastructure projects.
Mhm.
Whereas if I had my druthers, I would change all the laws and make it so that we did use our military for things like road construction. I consider it a public safety issue. You I consider it like a national security issue. I feel like our bridges need to be fixed. You know, and I would also like in times of when there was like a hurricane, like Hurricane Katrina, I would mobilize the entire regular army and send them down there to help. And
Mhm.
not, I don't like that my government has its hands tied behind its back where we don't use the regular army, we only send the National Guard. Fuck that.
I guess
And so what, like, the overarching feeling I have is like there are so many jobs I would like our government to do and not be like separated as far as this is a soldier and this is an electrician and this is a nurse. You know, I want just a grayer area where somebody could be all of that. You know,
I guess
somebody could have all these professions, and whatever we need done, they go out and do.
I guess strategically, the reason you wouldn't employ the full military or the full concentration of the military to natural disasters is because strategically it would make you vulnerable to foreign invaders. It's essentially saying, well, after a hurricane, this is when the military is going to be the most occupied and disengaged from their post.
Well, we also have giant battalions of people that are on training exercises when these natural disasters happen that are not at their posts on these military installations. And I would send every goddamn one of them down there if all they were doing was camping out and then marching down the streets, flipping cars so that they were not upside down anymore, and just clearing trees. I would send the military down there to distribute water. You know, save people from the tops of their houses during floods, shit like that. I would send them.
So basically, like they'd become auxiliary FEMA guys almost.
Yes, and I just don't like how we have so much red tape that's based on, you know, 250 years ago, British soldiers were quartered in houses and took over things by order of the Queen, you know. So now we can't run an effective government where we actually get shit done because those fuckers back in the day fucked up. We should be able to spend money on having somebody do service to their country, and then when we have a need, have them perform the service no matter what it is.
I know that my cousin's a Marine, and he's told me a few times that he lives in Pittsburgh, and he said a couple of their heavy snowfalls where there was some real problems in the city, they would actually deploy them to help assist.
Those are normally like voluntary things where they don't go in uniform. They might be wearing their PT uniform.
Okay, I see.
They don't go in their BDU uniform. They don't represent the military. But like I've seen previously when I was on Keesler Air Force Base, the base commander won't require it of anyone. But like you'll go out for PT in the morning. You're going on a run, and then you start running down towards the front gate of the base, and you go out there, and then all of a sudden. Everyone's breaking formation to just move trees out of the road, you know, so that we can run up and down every street in Biloxi, you know. And these are some of the experiences that I've had that make me feel this way. That like we should have a more pliable civil service force that can handle everyone's strengths and weaknesses. You know, and
you
so
guys,
when I see that these we need to allow transgender people into the military, I'm like, yeah, we do, but we also need to have a military that isn't broken up into 5 different areas where they have such giant stereotypes that are preventing all this from happening. Like when you think of Marine, there's an image that comes into your head of a jarhead. Right? We need to have a civil service force where it's just whatever that needs to be done, we do it. If it took creating a sixth branch of the military in order to start integrating all of these people into the ability to serve. I would take all the deaf people, all the flat-footed people, all the transgender people, and put them in that, and then actually do things with them, like fix our bridges.
Yeah. I mean, but how many people in the Democratic Party would support an expansion like that on the military industrial complex?
Well,
Right.
you'd be surprised. There's not much difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as far as expansions when it actually comes to the brass tacks of do we make it happen or not. Government grows. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
what they say, up front is not always what happens. Spending happens. It just keeps on happening.
Yeah.
You
Oh
can't
yeah.
count on either party to cut spending on anything.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the old joke whenever you ask somebody, are you for government cutbacks? And everybody's like, yes. Okay, great. We're going to cut this. No. It's like everybody approves uh, cutting back on government and grassroots government. And then as soon as you start to cut away at things, it's like, you can't do that. We need this. We need this. So it's kind of it is a funny thing when you consider it.
Number 4 says we support the right of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals' ability to use facilities consistent with their gender identity and expression in any public place.
Yeah. The gender washrooms thing.
Yeah. Wasn't it Target that had that problem for a while in the news?
I think that I think they were one of the first the first big conglomerates to open that up.
Yeah.
From what I understand, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Bathroom politics are always kind of a strange thing to me. I mean, it's just something you don't generally think of until somebody draws an underline under it. It's like, well, how many people really care who's in the bathroom? Like, do we go around and check who's in the next stall? I mean, most people go in, do their business, and they get out. They just, it seems like I guess
when I deal with my clients and which dorm they might go in or which wing of whatever that they might go in, I always ask them, where do you feel safest? And if that changes, tell somebody and we'll change where you're at. You know, where do you feel safe going? And if you don't like going there, if you find you don't like it, we'll just accommodate you otherwise.
and with I'm guessing that this also includes like change rooms and stuff too.
Yeah.
It seems like to me, it seems like something that should be put to a vote. Where, I mean, in terms of like uh, women that are transitioning into men and using men's bathrooms, or men's uh, locker rooms and stuff, I don't see a huge problem. But how do women feel about all this? Like, what are their thoughts on that? Because I mean, it's hard to get info from polls and stuff because people, polls aren't always useful. But what is
in practice? I have seen that people are a lot more accepting than I feared, and I haven't really seen much problems with women accepting men to women transgender people.
I think that would be really my only concern with something like that as well. How would a women feel about that? And I mean, if they're cool with it, and I mean, I don't really see an issue with it. It's kind of a non-issue as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean,
Number 5 says we support the expanding federal anti-discrimination law to list sexual orientation and gender identity and expression as protected classes.
Hmm. Federal interest to list sexual orientation. Yeah, that one. Protected classes. I mean, doesn't everybody like? Isn't everybody covered under basic human rights acts as a U.S.
No,
citizen?
not for these two things. See, gender and gender identity are different, right?
You mean you mean sex and gender identity?
Sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Yeah, all those things being different. Only one of those is protected.
But I mean, as citizens of the U.S., doesn't everybody enjoy the same? I mean, the same protection and rights. I mean,
No, you could probably be fired for disclosing a gender identity that they didn't know when they hired you in many states.
and that's still like
And that's why they say we support expanding the federal anti-discrimination law, because our state law is already there.
Mm-hmm.
Other states are not there.
I see. So let's say somebody that identifies as homosexual gets fired from a job, and it's not considered a discrimination. For example, like say if a minority got fired from a job and had certain protections for not being able to be fired specifically because of that reason. Say homosexuals wouldn't enjoy that same kind of protection in some states. Is that what that's?
Yes, that's what
I see. About. Okay. Because I'm always curious when you see a specific demarcation like that, where it says a certain category of people don't have rights, and it's like but that makes sense. I mean, if that's
strange though that we're talking about federal law in a state platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, you were talking about international support in one of the previous bullet points for women's, or what was it? There was support of international rights of
particular. Yeah, you think that should be in the national platform, but whatever.
Yeah, it's more of a federal thing.
I'm okay with redundancy. We're this far in, right?
Well, we've given everything else a rubber stamp.
We support the protection of marriage equality, and we urge our elected representatives at all levels to vigorously oppose legislation or ballot initiatives that would narrow the definition of marriage.
See, my thinking on this is I just think the state should get out of the marriage business altogether.
Me too.
I think it's just, it generates a lot of heat, but not a lot of light, this issue. It just seems like something that shouldn't be handled by the state. And that, I think the government needs to get out of that business. It seems like because it's always going to be a loser, no matter how you phrase it, no matter how you frame it. Like, there's always going to be opposition to it. Whereas if you just take the government out of it altogether, then it just seems like that's the better way to go with that.
Number 7, we support the expansion and enforcement of the current definition of civil rights and hate crime laws to include sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, and support efforts that promote education and training about and the reporting of hate crimes.
The current definition. Enforcement of the current definition. See, that's kind of a strange thing, because a lot of
we're going to go with the current definition to include.
Yeah.
Which it doesn't include it right now, but I imagine that they mean that they want to include it in the new definition.
And the way it's framed, the way that the whole thing's phrased, also implies that they're not currently doing that. It's like we're not enforcing the current definition. And then, so it seems like it kind of fails on two fronts, because we know with a lot of the more progressive politics, there is a little bit of a definition lottery where they like to, bring in terms that are more inclusive or cover a larger umbrella. So it seems almost like they're shooting themselves in the foot with this particular policy, where it's saying, well, it kind of negates other definitions or expanded definitions, or it just seems very odd to frame it that way. I don't see any advantage to them doing that. It's very odd.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in terms of a progressive, this almost seems like something that would be more of a Republican plank, where they want to lock down definitions and say, no, you're not allowed to expand the definitions. These categories are already distinct. We don't need to change them. We don't need to expand them. So this one's a really strange one to see in a Democrat, as a Democrat plank. It's very odd.
Well, if you don't go by the grammar that they used and you just try to imagine what their intent was, they want to add sexual orientation and gender identity to being protected as something that hate crime laws would apply to if somebody were to be discriminated against and then have a crime happen against them because of those things. And so that I don't have a problem with their intent, but the way that they wrote it just sucks.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's saying we don't want to expand the definition. We want to, as it currently stands, and yet they want to expand the category of who that protects. It just, I mean, frankly, it's a nonsensical statement. It just doesn't logically follow.
Well, on to number 8 with more nonsensicalness, because there's bad grammar in that one too. We support legislation and policies that promote dignity and safety for incarcerated members of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and queer communities, comma, solitary confinement is not an acceptable solution for safety.
So the private prisons for profit want to have an expanded state. See, this again seems strange. It's like, why wouldn't you just get rid of the private prison system? Like, why not advocate for that and have it all state, have it a completely state organized institution, and they handle that anyway? It's almost like they're trying to shoehorn something into something that they don't agree with already. Because as far as
firstly, when I said comma, it should have been a period. They wrote comma, right? That should have been a whole new sentence. Solitary confinement is not an acceptable solution for safety. For safety, in many cases, it is the only option that someone might have. If somebody is gay and they get put in a prison where there's a lot of people who are homophobic, right? They might get to the point where they are beaten every day in that prison, and the only option the prison finds that keeps them from being beaten is to keep them partitioned away from the rest of the prisoners. Now, solitary confinement, as far as like putting them in quote unquote the hole, might be cruel and unusual punishment if they don't deserve to be there. But keeping them in a separate wing of the prison where other homophobic prisoners aren't beating them up all the time might be the best way to go for them.
But why is it acceptable anybody's getting beaten in prisons?
It isn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's almost like they're saying it's wrong if people get beaten, but it's really wrong if this demographic gets beaten. It's like, well, I'm just not. I mean, I don't support anybody getting beaten. I mean, why is this happening at all? You know, it seems like it's almost so focused on a specific demographic that it kind of misses the entire overarching point. Like, there just shouldn't be violence in prisons, period. They shouldn't have to segregate people and all these different things. I mean, there just shouldn't be beatings at all.
Shouldn't have to, but this is America. We
That prison
reasons
system.
why these beatings happen.
Yeah, that prison system is terrible. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's like, it's such a redo. It's almost like this is like a Windows 10 patch on a crappy system. It really is it's just such a bad system. I mean,
yeah,
I wouldn't even, like, even if you pass this kind of legislation, I mean, would it even, I mean, the system's it's so abysmal that it's like, well, would that even improve it? I mean, it's just so corrupt and bent. It's kind of a band-aid.
You did bring up the whole private prisons thing, and I hope that later in this we see that. Number 9, we support asylum for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex immigrants who face persecution. Countries that support criminalizing their sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. Okay, it's still written so horribly. The grammar.
It's abysmal.
Oh my God.
It's abysmal.
But I'll say, okay, yes. If somebody's going to get killed because they're gay, don't send them back to their country.
Yeah, but again, this is another one of those things that's like, well, I mean, it's in a sense a special consideration. Because at this stage, they're saying, well, at this point, we're excluding people, but we can't exclude these people. I mean, it just seems to me like you would open that up and make that a general statement that we support asylum for people that are facing persecution in countries. I mean, I guess
I see the unintended consequence being the bosom buddies argument.
I guess
where
because
one person might say that they're gay just to come from a country where, like Uganda, where they would be killed. So somebody who wasn't gay and they were in Uganda and they wanted to live in America, they would just come to America and say, "I'm gay. Don't send me back."
I guess the reasoning, the argument for making that specific consideration to that demographic is because they are disproportionately persecuted in their countries they're coming from. So, for example, like gays being thrown off of buildings, like things where we know there's active discrimination that targets these people. I guess that would be the argument to support the specific consideration.
Next is we support the spirit of the DNC rule for gender balance. However, this rule leaves out many people that do not identify in the gender binary. We seek a change to the DNC charter and bylaws to include people who identify outside of the gender binary.
So it's, again, this is another nonsense statement. It's saying we support the spirit of the DNC rule for gender balance. However, we don't support the spirit of the rule for the. I mean, it's just like I don't know what to make of that. That's atrocious.
Well, having seen it in practice, where I signed up to be a delegate at large and finally became a state delegate, I had to sign on a men's sign-up sheet, and there was a women's sign-up sheet, and it was the odds of me becoming a delegate were greater if I was a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because at the precinct level, they sent forth a certain amount of men and a certain amount of women, and so they made a quota system of how many more men that they needed, how many more women that they needed.
Yeah, I just don't support gender quotas. I think that's just something that, I mean, just give me the best person for the job.
Well,
I mean,
even after gender quotas, it's still mostly men. Mostly white, old, crusty, balding men. And it's like those are the people that want to be involved in politics.
Yeah, I mean, is it a matter of, is there a lack of applicants or a lack of people that are being taken in after the fact? Because I mean, if you have 5 women that are actually applying for the position, and
the actual breakdown when I panned my camera around, It did not look any more diverse than the Republican Party. That was really strange to me because they have all of these programs within their party in order to increase diversity, and yeah, they're feel good programs, but look at the party that doesn't have any of these programs, and they still have just as much diversity.
Hmm. Yeah, it just seems it's like I don't envy people that don't want to run for political positions or take a career in politics. I mean, I don't know too many people that really want that, don't have that goal. I mean, I can think of many things I would rather do than be a politician. So, when you see a lacking in demographics, it's like, oh, okay, one particular demographic seems to shine at this thing, but it just seems like such a crappy job. Frankly, I'm surprised anybody applies for it.
Well, it's not just at the level where we're electing people. See, it on that level, there are far more women candidates for the actual positions for office in the Democratic Party, but the actual delegates, they don't look any more diverse than the Republican Party did. And I've been in both parties now. I know. I've got footage of both parties. And I can tell you that I saw consistently more Hispanic people and more Middle Eastern people and more people from India in the Republican Party than the Democratic Party.
The other strange consequence, the sort of adverse consequence to these sort of gender quota things where you have to have this equal representation is, well, what happens if there's more women candidates? What if there's more women that are applying for the work? Does that still hold? I mean, do they shut down a certain amount of applicants? Say, no, we're already full.
Well, they don't do it as far as like the offices. They do it as far as the allocation of delegates.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I really don't see the gender quota thing as really a solution to anything. It seems to bring more problems than it fixes.
If I go back to the statewide offices that we're voting on, the CU region at large has 2 women running.
Mm-hmm.
The treasurer has 3 men. Right? Secretary of State has a man and a woman. Attorney General has 1 woman and 2 men. And governor has 1 woman and 2 men.
Hmm.
That's still a lot more women than the Republicans would have to be able to vote for as a delegate. But as far as the delegates are concerned, not much difference in demographics.
See, my thing is, I'm an equal opportunity person. I just want the best person for a job, and the gender is really a non-factor. It's like if they're really good, they're really good. If they're terrible, they're terrible. I mean, I think it's almost so simple that it's strange that we sort of bloat things out like this and make it such a huge cause. Strange.
Indigenous people. We support policies that ensure Indigenous peoples have the right to self-determination, to protect their environments, and to preserve their ways of life.
Well, can we start by giving these people clean water? I mean, how about we start there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it sounds good on paper, but what does it mean? Because they don't really protect their environments. They don't really protect their ways of life. And if you look at the condition of some of the reserves, it's abysmal. They don't even have clean water. Some places don't even have electricity. I mean, there's so much work to do before we even get to this kind of rhetoric. It just seems like, that's because that's such a big issue.
What area do you live in?
Me?
Mhm.
I'm in Toronto.
See, I live in Colorado, and I've been through the Navajo reservation many, many times. And I've been through the Pine Ridge Reservation. And what you're saying, it does, like, I don't want it to be true at all.
No, it's
My
terrible.
feelings are not with you. But when I think about the reality of what I've seen, I'm like, God damn it, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, they live in sheds. They live in. I mean, some of them are shacks. They're lean-tos. I mean, it's. I mean, I grew up when I didn't always live here. I was born in Montreal, in Quebec, Le Quebecois, and I lived near a reserve. It was called Kanawaki, and the condition, the living conditions there were absolutely terrible. I mean, my father worked on there. I went there every day. It was just abysmal. Terrible, 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 terrible. And I mean, you'd have a government it talks out of both sides of its mouth, where it says, "Let's appease these people uh, when we campaign," and then when it comes time to getting the job done, I mean, it's just the sort of thing that always gets put onto the back burner, and it's just it's a real problem. Like, I mean, they say, "Oh, we're not going to build the pipeline through here," but wow, that train is loud. When push comes to shove, nothing really gets done. I mean, in a sense,
It's louder.
it's yeah. There's so much work to be done with the indigenous thing. There's so many decisions that have to be made that I think that we're really putting the cart before the horse on some of these things. It's like, it's great that universities, like here we have a thing. I don't know. I hear it sometimes in the States, but I hear it more often here that even in big speeches or especially in universities and stuff, where they'll take time to mention that we're on native land. This land doesn't really belong to us, and we're gracious that we're here, sort of thing. But when it comes time to actually doing things like giving these people clean water, giving these people just decent basic infrastructure, they totally get they just get ignored. And that's where it fits into that category of empty rhetoric, like the virtue signal type rhetoric, where it's like, we say this because we recognize the problems, but when it comes down to it, we don't really do anything. At least that's the condition of things here in Canada. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the States specifically. I've heard it varies. I mean, some states are better than others, but I mean, I've heard that, from what I understand, there's still some very similar parallels there to what we have here.
Well, I think what you're saying has to do with number 2 as well, where it says we support honoring existing treaties with Native American tribes and ensuring the protection of the sovereign rights of the Native American population.
Oh, it's just atrocious they even have to mention that. It's like, yeah, we support honoring existing treaties. It's like, well, no shit, you shouldn't honor existing treaties. That's the point of treaties. The fact that even has to be, I mean, the fact that's even raised as an issue is just, it just goes to show that the state of that particular relationship, huh?
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
If this were taken to like the national level, this is totally about the pipelines.
Yeah, right? Yeah, the pipelines is the big U.S. topic. Here it's golf courses. They keep what they essentially did for a while was they would give First Nations people loans, bank loans, and they would almost unquestionably, like, anybody qualifies sort of situation. And then when they would default on the loans, because a lot of the propositions that they put forward were unequitable, it'd be somebody like, well, I want to build a drive-in theater, and I want to buy this property and this, and they would buy things on the reserves and develop all this stuff. And then when the bank would default on it, they would take the property. That was kind of that was a little loophole for sort of reacquiring all these different properties. It's just, so it's things like golf courses here. I mean, the pipeline thing might be more of an issue in different provinces, but here in Quebec, it's more trivial things, and it's things like fisheries and developing or destroying the land that makes, polluting the water, all these sort of different things that funnel into this. So they've really, the government here at least has done an atrocious job at honoring treaties and honoring property rights and stuff. I don't know what state it's in there.
I'm in support of honoring the treaties. I just feel like when it comes down to actually honoring the treaty, all the other politicians in the party and the delegates will go like, whoa, hold on now. We said it, but that's going to fuck us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I'm actually in support of, if there's a treaty, fucking honor it.
Yeah, otherwise we're just writing things on toilet paper. I mean, if we're not going to honor treaties and agreements and default on things, then at that stage, we're really dealing with a basal issue of why are we even coming up with these things? Because they sound good, because it sounds good in a campaign speech. Treaties, if we're gonna give them out, if we're going to sign them, if we're going to participate in that contract, we just have to honor it. It just seems like there's no anything less than that is just a facade. I think that's even worse. The fact that it's even an option to opt out of treaties or just seems like that's a discussion that I think we have to have in the first place. Like, this shouldn't be a party plank. This should be just a federal and state level expectation.
Yeah. Next thing we have is corporations are not people, which is the whole Citizens United thing here in our country. And I'll go along with it and say, we went too far in giving rights to corporations as if they were legally people. But I do believe that if we were to overturn the ruling that gave corporations the same rights as people in our country, we would find a way around it. As far as like companies that wanted to be evil would say pick up a homeless person off the street and then have them legally responsible for their actions. If they needed someone who was flesh and blood, they'd find somebody who was flesh and blood.
Oh yeah, no, the corporatocracy that's going on there is it's definitely not a good thing. Definitely not a good thing. That's definitely a problem. And the loopholes and just the ways people can hide and just be extremely unethical is it's definitely a problem. I think that might be something that's a bigger problem in the States than it is here.
It has been.
Yeah. We've definitely got our fair share of problems. Don't get me wrong. I'm not singing the praises of how wonderful things are here. We have plenty of work to do, but that's something it's not as big of a problem. It's at least not as immediately obvious to me that it's as big of a problem. It seems this is a really uniquely American thing.
The next one is slavery and human trafficking is bad. Should not be tolerated anywhere, and efforts should be taken to protect people from slavery and forced servitude. Okay. We support implementation of best practices and prevention to keep people from being coerced or forced into situations such as forced marriages, illegal adoptions, sweatshops, unpaid domestic service, and sex trades. We support the implementation of best practices in detection of trafficking crimes across borders. We support protections for victims of trafficking, including allowing for a trafficking victim to remain in the U.S. if they assist in the prosecution of the perpetrator. That's a weird one.
Yeah. It's like several planks all of a sudden.
Yeah.
We've just kind
As
of
far as
did it.
that's concerned, anyone who's a witness in an ongoing investigation, yeah, I think we should hold on to them. But this, the way it's written, says like after the perpetrator is caught, they still get to remain in the U.S.
Hmm.
Do they get given a path to citizenship?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm okay with that. I just want to know.
Yeah, I don't know what to make. I can't make heads or tails of that. It's kind of like the political mashed potato.
Number 4, we support enhanced criminal penalties and international cooperation in pursuit of trafficking networks. Okay. And number 5, we support reintegration of victims of human trafficking, including witness protection programs, educational/vocational training opportunities, financial assistance, shelter, and counseling services.
Yeah, we're just kind of revisiting the previous one again. I mean, there's a lot of redundancy in these.
Yeah.
It's like it's the same thing, and then they add one little different thing or two different sort of. Yeah, I don't know. That's atrocious. I can't believe that they thought that was copy that was fit to send out and vote on. I mean, that's appalling.
U.S. Patriot Act repeal, FISA, and NDAA revision. We see no need to react thoughtlessly to baseless fear and believe it is time to undo the restrictions and invasions that occurred with the U.S. Patriot Act and reclaim our civil liberties as defined in the Bill of Rights. We support the repeal of the U.S. Patriot Act, particularly provisions allowing invasions of privacy such as warrantless searches and seizures, roving wiretaps, searches of library records, and bulk data and metadata collection. Similarly, we support revising the National Defense Act of 2012, NDAA, to delete the destructive detainee provisions.
See, they jammed two things in there because I'm like getting rid of the Patriot Act. Absolutely. I mean, that thing is just atrocious. I'd never supported that. So yeah, I'm all for that. The second portion here where they just said, oh, and by the way, similarly, we support revising the National Defense Act to delete the destructive detainee provisions. It's like, okay, now that's a whole other category of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like what does that mean exactly? Like how does that unfold exactly? Like I'm not even sure I know what they're referring to here. Is this like the Gitmo thing?
Yes.
So it's related to that sort of stuff.
Uh-huh.
I see. You see, like to me, those are two distinct. Those should be two distinct planks.
Mm-hmm. So it says we need to repeal the U.S. Patriot Act in its entirety, as well as any enhancements to the original act. Firm up assurances of the Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, including DNA acquisition, gathering of electronic materials, GPS tracking, drone surveillance, etc. 3, eliminate public and/or private surveillance and/or investigatory tactics that are intrusive, limit freedom of speech, interrupt peaceful assembly, invade individual privacy, or interfere with personal faith decisions. And 4, demand that due process be observed for all people detained under suspicion of terrorism. Now, I'm okay with 3 and 4. I don't really fully understand the implications of getting rid of the Patriot Act. Like, I seriously, like, in my position in life, I feel like I would need to take 3 or 4 classes on all of the implications of Patriot Act before I would make a decision of this magnitude. But here I am.
Well, part of the problem with it is you could be put on a list on a baseless accusation, and it could seriously inhibit your right to movement, your right to different rights. It's kind of revisiting McCarthyism, where it's like if you're accused of being a terrorist or a communist, you don't get to access certain things, and there's really no end to it. It just kind of, it's an ongoing thing where you just accumulate these lists, and people have a difficult time getting off them. I mean, I remember there was one case. Remember there was an infant. I think it was a newborn baby, maybe a month or two old, that its name was on a terrorist list, and therefore the family couldn't board a plane. It's like it just supersedes common sense, you know?
My nephew had the same thing happen to him.
It's that sort of stuff where you just have people, because I mean,
my nephew's name was on a terrorist watch list. His name, seriously, is Mike Jones.
Yeah.
How many fucking Mike Joneses are there in the world?
Yeah, I mean,
at the time there was a famous rapper named Mike Jones.
Well, and it's ripe for abuse too, because somebody could say, you know what, that AOD video, I really took offense to it. I don't like it. I'm going to screw with this guy. I'm going to file a report. I'm going to file an anonymous report and have him put on a list, and then therefore you're screwed. Like, you can't travel, you can't, you can't get on a plane, you can't get it. Your Second Amendment gets
understood. And to me, the Patriot Act was pushed forward right after the 9/11 tragedy, and when that happened, not many people stood up against it.
Yeah, well, Obama expanded on it as well. I mean, Bush brought it in, and then Obama expanded on it.
But the same way that healthcare is seen as Obamacare, and therefore it was something that the Democratic Party did, so the Republican Party should always seek to repeal it because they can't stand that Democrats got to win.
Well, it was
Democrats now look at the Patriot Act and want to get rid of it in its entirety because it's credited to the Bush era.
Yeah. Well, that's what's interesting.
There are things in it that are meant for our protection. And if we're just going to, throw the baby out with the bathwater, I want to know what we're throwing out.
Yeah.
I understand the bathwater is basically hot lava, and it is very bad bathwater. But I still don't understand all that we would be doing by getting rid of everything in its entirety.
That's true. I think that's a sound position, Evan. I don't know all the implications of it either. I know that certain aspects of it, maybe I should reframe it that way, certain aspects of it are rotten. Yeah. But I mean, the things that we know are bad, those things can go. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the full breadth of that particular animal, I think is we would definitely need to know more about it. It'd be really nice if they sent you some documentation that did unpack that along with this wonderful bullet point presentation. It's nice to know these things, especially when you're voting on them as a
delegate.
Yeah.
But I've got Google and I've got a week.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot here to unpack in a week. I mean, if you were to look at the full scope of half of these things, you're in for a month of reading and weighing things and translating legalese, and it's I don't envy you in that process.
We've been at this for about 3 hours now, and we're on page 6 of 23.
Wow. That's
And
impressive.
so far, what I've learned is I need to research other things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my knowledge of a lot of these things is extremely limited with American politics. I mean, some of them are obvious. Some of the things sort of wink at specific things, but other things are so vague and convoluted that it's hard to make heads or tails of it. I mean, this is something that really would require at least a month of considerations and research and diligence. If if we're not just sort of rubber stamping things, that is. I mean, I'm guessing that's kind of what they're hoping for, is that
Mhm.
it just gets the seal of approval and they go forward. But
Well,
not...
also their platform committee supposedly has gone over these things for months and still came up with this.
That's a concern.
Okay, so number 5, encourage transparency in governmental proceedings and eliminate any secrecy that creates obstacles for U.S. citizens. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, but we still need to have provisions for protecting government secrets. If we're completely transparent, then we have no government secrets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's good reason why you wouldn't want a government to be completely transparent.
Yeah. Number 6, revise the Federal Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, to end warrantless wiretapping of U.S. citizens, eliminate or reform FISA courts, and end warrantless physical searches of the property of or persons of U.S. citizens.
Now, this is interesting because this conflicts with another Democrat position. Let's say you have a gun freeze, or even just a particular model of gun. Like we'll go with the AR-15, and say that if you're on it, or well, you could even go with the full gun freeze, because I think if you're on a terrorist watch list, you cannot be in possession of arms. Am I correct on that?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you suspect that somebody that's on that terror list has firearms. This sort of blanket, you can't do the search and seizure thing. Seems like it at least to some capacity conflict with that.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of like when we're talking about things like the Patriot Act, where people can have their rights frozen just by being put on one of these lists. When you say we want full transparency, we want anybody that's on this list cannot hold guns, and you say this is one of the gun restrictions you want to enforce. On the other hand, people that are reported reported on one of these watch lists or terrorist watch lists via the Patriot Act, they're saying, well, we can't do search and seizures. It's like, well, that seems like that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
like that circle doesn't roll. It's got a couple of square edges there. It's not, it doesn't, it seems inconsistent with other positions, or would be self-defeating.
Well, I'm all in favor of my own personal privacy, and so I like where this circle doesn't roll. I'd rather have it affect the ability of law enforcement to get guns from suspected terrorists or private citizens, and go with my privacy. Because I feel like if they're warrantlessly just looking through everyone's private lives, there's a saying here in America that everyone commits at least 3 felonies a day.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what you get caught. That
And what?
determines your life and your outcome, right?
Yeah, no,
But the saying is everyone commits at least 3 felonies a day.
yeah.
And all it takes is warrantless wiretaps for them to find those felonies. And you might not even know what the felonies are because, of laws that are written in the style of this platform page right here.
Yeah, no, we have some legislation that's phrased very similarly. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of putting on the Democrat hat right now. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I mean, I'm certainly more center conservative, so I'm not a Democrat, so I'm just kind of putting on the Democrat hat and saying, how does this square with other things that I know are in the platform? So I'm entertaining the breadth of the democratic process here.
Number 7, remove immunity from prosecution from telecommunications and other corporations that facilitate governmental spying on U.S. citizens.
Remove immunity from prosecution from telecommunications and other that facilitate governmental spying on U.S. citizens. The thing is, are they going to do it anyway? I mean, it just seems.
Well, if they are given a treaty, a treaty that says if you put these wiretaps on your servers so that we get all the data that crosses across these lines, we promise to not prosecute you for the act. If they make an agreement like that, and they call it an immunity, but it's basically a treaty with this telecommunications corporation, we're all of a sudden going to break that treaty and say, no, we're going to remove your immunity even though we gave it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's backwards. And telecommunications is a pretty broad thing. I mean, okay, let's say you get information that checks out as a result of, let's take something, trivial, like something that's common now is like this Cambridge Analytica thing. Let's say that reveals specific information about an individual that checks out. Are they allowed to use that in court?
No, unless they had a warrant that, or they had probable cause. They're not allowed to use that stuff in court if it just was incidental.
Kind of a double-edged sword, because if it was something you found out that they were planning like a terrorist attack, or you managed to infiltrate a particular thing that they're literally planning something that's going to kill people, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, I'm just kind of I'm just spitballing this thing around and trying to look for a bigger scope of it, but I don't know what to make of that one, to be honest with you.
To me, I think it's okay to rescind immunity going forward, and say, okay, stop doing this, and you will no longer get immunity for any future violations of this law.
Yeah.
But you cannot remove immunity from someone retroactively if they had an immunity agreement in place that they did stuff for our government, under duress, probably. It's not like they wanted to do stuff for our government. It was extra work on them.
Right.
It was under duress of, if you don't help us, then, we might do something to you. We might start regulating you in a different way. So it's not like I feel like the telecommunications companies were evil in this at all, or even had a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, up until this point, I'd say this one plank right here, remove immunity from prosecution from the telecommunications companies. I feel like that one plank right there should be removed. Like, without a doubt, that one for me is like, if I were to get a Scantron sheet and be able to vote line by line on all of this stuff, that one I would vote no, don't include it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm with you
the
on that one.
process for amending this is so atrocious
Yeah.
that yeah.
Yeah, no, it's that one's definitely got some baggage. No doubt about that.
So number 8 is revise the NDAA to delete the detainee provisions that provide for indefinite detention of terror suspects without charge, trial, or representation by counsel.
So Gitmo.
Yeah,
Basically.
well, also we have other more secretive places around the world.
Oh yeah, no, I would certainly expect that.
Gitmo is very
Well, that's the public. That's the
yeah.
That's the Kim Kardashian of all the. That's the famous one. That's the one we can all sound off when people asked. But oh yeah, no, I can imagine there's multiple.
That's the visible one.
Yeah.
I do have a problem with them never getting charged or not getting due process. I do. But the problem is, due process is normally something that we reserve for citizens.
Yeah, it's a right that yeah, exactly. It's a U.S. citizen right. But it's
we do have due process for other things like immigration, right?
And it's where you get into this is no longer a policy.
Yeah.
Point. This becomes a set of principles and ethics and a consistency within ethics and saying it touches on we wouldn't do this this is our values. We wouldn't do this. We don't behave like this, except when we're somewhere outside of our home. And I think that's where that sort of argument starts to break down is when you look at the consistency of ethics. Because if you have a certain set of values, but you throw them, if you're overseas, for example, fighting to represent those values and represent yourself as an American that upholds this way of life, and you don't uphold it in any which way or fashion overseas, it really becomes a veneer. It becomes a facade. But it's again, that's taking things on more of an abstract philosophical principles position, not necessarily.
And I feel like I'm okay with that abstract line because I do feel absolutist about whether or not you are a citizen of my country. I want you to have due process.
Yeah, I mean it's a consistent position. It's an ethically consistent position.
So I'm okay with number 8.
Yeah, you don't want to become the thing that you're fighting, essentially.
Yeah.
If you have to become the thing that you're fighting, then the cause is dubious at best. So
let me show you how you have to amend any of these things, because I'm going to cut this video short at page 6 of 23 because we're already almost 4 hours into this, right?
It's gonna be a multi-part series.
It's gonna have to be, right? I'm gonna start with part 2, criminal justice, on the next one. But let me show you the amending form. This is the minority report petition, right? So the part that you want changed and everything that you want changed about it goes in this box right here.
That's ridiculous.
Right?
that's worse than the cheat sheets that, when teachers would give you a thing. It's like, well, you could bring this cheat sheet to the exam, whatever you can fit in this box. And it's like, yeah, but I have, I have 4 semesters of, of
Okay.
physics to put in here. Can I maybe get a space a little bigger?
So in order to get this changed, you must get 13 members of the platform committees to sign it. Right? It has 15 spots, but you need 13 in order to have this be voted on the floor. You have to get those 13 signatures by 10 a.m. on Saturday.
This upcoming Saturday.
This upcoming Saturday, yes. Which the only place you would find all of these people, see, it says prior to 10 a.m. on Saturday, April 14th, right? The only place you would find all of these people all in one place to be able to get their signatures is at this place. They are all wandering around on the floor.
That is a
hobnobbing with people. And here's a list of all of them. You just have to find one of these people for each one of those slots, right? And at least it gives their county, right? So if you know what county they're in, if you're looking for a specific one, you can go to that. Basically, on the floor, they're divided by county where you sit. So you can just start calling off names of the people who are in that county who you know are from the platform committee, right? But
that is abysmal.
yes,
that is absolutely. I mean, what's the point if they're gonna? I mean, it's obvious they're doing that to so any amendments essentially, most of them will fail. I mean, nobody's gonna.
yes.
So what's the point? What's the point of having delegates if you're going to give them a piece of paper, have them fill it out, and say, "Oh, and by the way, you're not going to have adequate time to actually look into what the implications of these planks are." And on top of that, you have to get 13 signatures. Good luck by Saturday.
Yeah,
that's.
I think what the point is political theater.
It is. It's ceremony. This is a very ceremonial procedure where it's like, yeah, we have delegates. We're going by the book, and then they're doing everything they can to. Because essentially at this point, I think what they're trying to do is just it's like whip votes, basically. Yeah. It's basically like, yeah, you could be against these specific planks, but you're not really against these specific planks.
So I'll probably turn on my camera and do like a part 2 tomorrow. But if we don't get through all of this, like I still will read it to myself to know what it is. But if we don't get to go over all of this, that's fine, you know. But
well, I think by the time we read it,
what we've found is as far as problems with what was written in about 2 pages worth of platform planks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many of these platform minority report petitions do you think I'd have to fill out?
Yeah. Well,
right.
Definitely.
I'm going definitely at least 4. If I'm going with just the solid points that I know I can make on the floor trying to get these signatures, I could do at least 4. But that's from 2 pages of 23.
Yeah.
Right. So if I was actually going for correcting all the grammatical errors to make sure that everything made sense, I'm probably up around 10.
Yeah. Well, at this
stage, that's with my leanings. With your leanings, I'd be at 20.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of problems here. There's a lot of problems.
So
I mean, well, I mean, at this stage,
me going around with 20 different pieces of paper, right? All of which having a different point about the platforms, and then trying to convince 13 people for each one to sign their name to the fact that they also agree that we should talk about this. When those 13 people are on this list of people who were on the platform committee that created the document in the first place.
And they're racing against the clock probably to get their 13 signatures on different things as well. So, when you start to convolute,
they don't have to. Well, maybe they feel like revising this the same, but yeah, there's other people. Like, hopefully, there would be other people that also had concerns, right? I'm going to tell you what. I'm filming the entire thing.
Yeah, you should.
We'll see how many concerns actually pop up.
Yeah. Wow.
My money is on 0.
Yeah, there's just not enough time. I mean, there's not enough time to correct the grammar. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? If it's got to be done by Saturday, it's like, well, can we at least revise the grammar on this thing so it's legible? And there's not enough time to do that. I mean, that little box they gave you doesn't even accommodate that. So yeah, I mean, it's very, this to me just seems like it's very ceremonial, where they're just going through the motions and it's like, okay, guys, rubber stamp that, we're moving forward. It's just like, I've been part of other committees before, so I've seen the very similar types of tactics, and
yeah,
and I know that even in our Senate, like a lot of the legislation, they'll give you a novel and say you've got to read this by tomorrow, and any objections, we'll have a meeting for the objections between 9:30 and 9:02. Or 9:30 and 9:32, and then we'll move forward with the agenda. This is essentially why nothing gets done.
Well, the thing that gets done is made not by the delegates. The thing that it gets done is not decided by the people who represent the actual constituency.
Yeah, that's just all kinds of wrong.
When you think about the two parties and which party should be more connected to the constituency and not making decisions behind closed doors, you'd think this could never happen in the Democratic Party. It should never be able to. And yet, here we are.
I suspect it's ubiquitous between both parties. I can imagine there's a lot of similarities.
Well, I can tell you the difference being, I got to vote on a Scantron for every platform plank when I was in the Republican Party, and the platform plank of opposing recreational marijuana was defeated because we were able to vote line by line.
Yeah, and that's, part of this exercise is to strengthen the platform of the party.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they don't want to do that. It's like, nope, we're on this road, and it's like, well, wait a second, we can improve this. Let's actually take this process seriously and invest some serious time into it and strengthen the platform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not immediately obvious that it's a good decision to ignore your delegates and just move forward on things based on platitudes and in a fixed agenda. I mean, that's just, nobody benefits from that. That hurts the party.
Yeah.
So
all right, man. Tomorrow I'll come back to part 2, and part 2 is the subsection on criminal justice.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm quite enjoying this. It's interesting to see the inner gears of how this all works actually in real time.
It's very crunched in real time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's just, and I mean, we're not, and half of these things we're not even really fully unpacking. We're just sort of just giving it like a, yeah, I guess so. Or, I mean, frankly, to really uh, look at these things and study them and research the full implications of each plank. I mean, we'd be here for ages. I mean, it's not a small task that they've put forward here to do it right. So I just think to have this done by Saturday. Like, when did they give you this form?
Uh, it was this week,
Yeah, see, that's
but I didn't have the time to address it until now. But now I'm on page 6 of 23. I could definitely read that many pages before Saturday morning, but as far as unpacking, even
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them,
Yeah.
it's
well, I think that's maybe that's something to raise. I mean, obviously they're doing it by design. I mean, it's not like they're going to be like, yeah, of course we limited your time to do this competently for reason, but it might be something worth mentioning. I think. I mean, just at least if you get a couple people that raise the issue, maybe you can get some headway in that.
and maybe just fill out a minority report petition myself just to change the voting from an all or nothing system to line by line.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And if I get anything done this year, it'll just be that.
Well, they should trust you guys to do that. I mean, that's the purpose of delegations, is that this is where you take the thing apart and you try to make the platform as rock solid as possible. And when they say, yeah, we trust you guys, we're going to bring you in, you're the key to getting these planks solidified so we can make them the best we can be. And by the way, it's got to be in by tomorrow. It's like, well, you know, that's no damn good. That's well, frankly, that's crap. That's atrocious. It's disappointing to see that kind of methodology.
Yeah.
I'd expect this from like Walmart or something, you know? Like, hey guys, what do you think about unions? By the way, you have till lunchtime to fully unpack all the implications of your future here. It's like, oh, okay. I just, you know, this is a very corporate-esque thing. Even the phrasing and stuff, it's very it's kind of a way of saying we respect the process, and then at the same time saying, and by the way, let's just get this done with. It's meaningless. We don't really care what you have to say anyway. This is what we're going with. We just want everybody to rubber stamp it, and it's just I think this is a microcosm of the bigger problem, frankly. I think this is why things don't improve, is because of this type of maneuvering and not fully respecting the entire process. I think that might be first and foremost as to why we don't see changes, why we don't see improvements, and why things just sort of go back and forth in this, you know, this political baseball. And I think I just think that's atrocious myself. I mean, I think it's unacceptable, because you as a delegate, your input should matter. I mean, you were put there, you were given that position for a reason, and you took that position for a reason. And if they don't let you do, or they don't let you fulfill that task, it really is just ceremonial. That's sad.
All right, man.
All right.
Time to end the broadcast, and we'll pick this up tomorrow.
Yeah, that was a good one. This is really interesting.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, you too. Take care, man.